podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
Welcome back to Tennis Unfiltered with me, James Gray of iNews.co.uk, the iNewspaper. It's the day 5 review, I believe. The second round is in the books. You're getting one of the in-transit daily podcasts that I do. The price you pay for getting a podcast every day is that sometimes I am a little bit behind the 8 ball when it comes to schedule. So in this case, I finished last night quite late, and today I'm up against it in terms of time. People who work in newspapers will know that Fridays are always very busy because Saturday papers are much bigger and have early deadlines, so I am a little bit more pushed today. So you get me talking into a microphone for the next, 20 minutes or so en route down the Rue La Fontaine, which I suppose could mean that if you're in Paris, you could now track me down and have a go at me for not liking Roger Federer or Rafa Nadal or Novak Djokovic enough, or whatever it might be, whichever particular cause célèbre is in your mind this week. I will do my best with wind noise. I can do things about that. I can't do anything about traffic noise, but hopefully that makes it authentic and Parisian. So, day 5. Anyone who's following me on Twitter will know, at James Gray Sport by the way, that I was doing something slightly unusual yesterday, which was, in order to write a feature about the unique nature of the French Open crowd, which everyone says is quite different from anywhere else in the world, I decided to spend all day on Philippe Chatrier. I watched every point played on Philippe Chatrier to try and get an idea of why the crowd are the way they are, the way they ebb and flow, and all of that. From a tennis perspective, I don't think I could have picked a worse day in the last 12 months of Grand Slam tennis, and that is no slight on the players involved, but I'm afraid that the matches were neither competitive nor particularly absorbing. There was one set against the head, as in only one set was won by the person who didn't go on to win the match. No 5-setters, no 3-set women's matches, one 4-setter, and that was it. And to be honest, that 4-setter might have been the least, it wasn't the least competitive, but it was hardly a competitive one. Casper Ruud opened up the day. Was a finalist here, last year in fact, and someone who's then been to another Grand Slam final, but since then has kind of fallen on his uppers in terms of form, but he probably couldn't have wished for a much better second round draw than Giulio Zeppeli, the Italian, who actually I think might figure in some interesting matches over the years. He's 21, came through qualifying. He's left-handed. He hits the ball really hard. Like his forehand is really big, but it's a bit wayward sometimes. The backhand isn't great as far as I can tell. Again, I'm not a tennis expert, as you all know. I just sort of, try and work it out as I go along. And yeah, he got a set off Ruud. Basically, the third set was pretty serve dominated. Looked like it was going to be, for all money, a very straightforward straight set victory, and then Ruud just chucked in an absolutely abysmal service game at 4-5, and that was that. No chance of reprieve, because that was the set, and then meant that he had to play another 40 minutes in order to get his way through to the third round, which he did, and fair play to him, well done. The crowd were not super engaged. I mean, they weren't there for the most part. Chatrier starts at 11:45. The tennis gets going about 11:55 in reality, and people are still filing in. All the corporates are still having their lunch and maybe glancing through the sort of glass front every now and again to watch a point or two, but the cheap seats up top are relatively full at that point, but for the most part it's pretty empty. And then everyone clears out. So after the match, go and get a gauloise and a black coffee and a baguette. I know, it's lots of cliches, but that is kind of it. And so when the next match starts, invariably it's kind of empty, and then fortunately they do let people in at One Love here. At most tournaments, they won't let you in for the first 3 games of the set, which is kind of infuriating. Especially given that these days, players, at One Love, do stop at their share for about 30 seconds, take a drink, towel off, blah, blah, blah. So there's plenty of time for people to get in. I mean, I think I've said this before, but I've always been of the opinion that in tennis, it kind of happens in New York, although it's not deliberate. But I think noise and movement should just be part of it. Just get on with it. You see it sometimes in golf, in the Ryder Cup, where players will be like, no, go on, cheer through my swing. And, I just think if we normalise that a bit, well, I don't know, kids don't want to sit still and be quiet, do they, during anything? So I can't see how you'd get kids to want to watch something where they have to sit still and keep quiet for, let's face it, the majority of the time. Anyway, separate rant. So then Iga Świątek played Claire Yu, who she had already thrashed, I think, for the loss of 1 game earlier this year. Claire Yu got a few more games this time, but Świątek was still... Świątek didn't play that well. It was quite windy again, but it's the ultimate kind of slightly disappointing match, because it's she didn't play well, so that wasn't particularly spectacular. She played alright second set. She played pretty well for second set, but not only was she not playing well, but she was still miles better than her opponent. It's just there's really no jeopardy here. And I was hoping the jeopardy might come when, uber aggressive Oceane Dodin, the last female French player left in the draw, took on Ons Jabeur, but again, the gap in quality was just a bit too big. Ons is good to watch, irrespective of whether it's a competitive match. Her drop shots, her demeanour, her personality. And I went to her because the rule I made for myself was I could leave Chatrier if there weren't players on court. And Jabeur finished at about 6:45, so that gave me an hour and a half. And so I went to her press conference and I asked her about the crowd, because at one point she hit a backhand return and it hit the net and dropped dead over the other side for a winner, and that was game point as well. And she walks to her bench and gets roundly booed by the boo-happy Parisian crowd. And it's what are you booing there? Who or what is being booed? Just sort of general sense of dissatisfaction. But yeah, I said to Ons, they're obviously not booing you per se, but it is sort of in your general direction. So how do you deal with that? Do you completely block it out? And she was really interesting on it, actually. She was like, well, obviously I didn't mean to hit the net and win the point like that. And then she was like, but it's really important not to engage with them when they're against you, because then it'll just get worse and worse and more hostile, which was really interesting. And actually the night match, Alexander Zverev said something not similar, but kind of echoed it. He won in straight sets. It was incredibly one-sided. The most into it the crowd got was at 4-love in the third set, when Molchan was trying to get himself on the scoreboard and avoid the bagel. And then they started, it was 10:30 at night, had a few beers, a couple of comments at Alexander Zverev, a couple of shout-outs, but nothing really wasn't that bad. And afterwards Zverev said, it can be, when they're against you, it can be pretty hostile in here. And that's true, it can be hostile, but they have to be engaged in the match. They don't just sort of get hostile or supportive out of nothing. It has to be one of their favourites, i.e. Federer, or to a slightly lesser extent Nadal, believe it or not, or a French player. And you kind of have to draw them into it otherwise. So yeah, I don't know, that would be my tip, if you're someone who needs the crowd behind you and really likes that positive energy they can bring you, and you're playing on Chatrier and you're not French and there's no French player involved, like, engage with them, you know, wave your arms at them, like, mess around with them a bit, because I think they're keen to be involved in the match, but they need a reason. That's my sort of takeaway from the whole thing. Anyway, it wasn't, as I say, a thrilling day of tennis because I was completely sat on the wrong court. There's a lesson in journalism. If you're going to marry yourself to a plan and stick to it rigidly, you're almost certainly going to miss the story, and that's what happened. There were two fabulous matches, dramatic for different reasons, on Suzanne Lenglen. The first one, Jannik Sinner against Daniel Altmaier. I mean, Jannik Sinner's starting to become the guy who plays brilliant matches at Grand Slams and never wins them. You know, he served for the match in the fourth set, 2 match points on his serve, didn't take them, obviously. And then it was a thrilling match, and like the biggest win of Altmaier's career for obvious reasons. And like, it was electric. My flatmate caught a tennis ball. She revealed that when I eventually got home last night. She had a look what I got from the Sinner match. Apparently you're allowed to keep them here, so that's fun. And yeah, like, Jannik Sinner needs to find a way to start winning big matches, I think. I'll ask Calvin about that tomorrow and see what he says, but that's what it feels like. And then after that, Arthur Rinderknecht against Taylor Fritz. The last French man left in the draw against Taylor Fritz. Now, that wasn't 5 sets, but it was a decent match. And Fritz won it, and immediately, like, possibly before the umpire had finished saying game, set, match, he put his fingers to his lips and brazenly, unrepentantly shushed the crowd. You can imagine how they took that. And then he did his post-match interview, answered one question, and then started getting booed again and tried to shush them again. And that was it. That was the end of his post-match interview. He didn't even do press. So I don't quite know what happened there, whether... Well, I don't know. I don't think the French journalist assaulted him, but it didn't happen. Just going past the florist, which might explain noises. Some sort of delivery just arrived. It's very late in the day for that. Anyway. Yeah, I mean, look. Fair play to him. I love shithousery. It creates drama in tennis. I don't think shushing the crowd is overstepping the line. Like, you know, I think that's perfectly acceptable. You know, doesn't hurt anyone. And, you know, I said, well, he's virtually guaranteed the French crowd are going to boo him for the rest of the tournament. Someone pointed out that Medvedev had this relationship with the crowd at New York. And then they kind of turned for him, but he did win the tournament, which sort of makes it easier to fall in love with the guy. Like, hell, Fritz might win the French Open, it's possible, he's still in the draw, therefore it's possible, but somehow it doesn't seem very likely. A quick look ahead to today as I walk down Boulevard Excellence, one of the busier streets very close to Roland Garros. It's the Djokovic-Alcaraz day, not they're playing each other, crikey, not yet. But it is the side of the draw which they're on in action. Alcaraz is the night match on Friday. He's playing Denis Shapovalov, which I think will be really entertaining. I put it as one of my ones to watch in my iNews newsletter. But I was I sort of caveated my, like, this would be a great match with, it could also be straight sets and a bit one-sided. Like, it'll be fun, but it might only be 2 hours, and hell, 2 hours is fine for some people, but I'm conscious that Shapovalov has not had a great year on clay. Yes, he's made it to the third round, but, you know, he's someone who likes to hit the ball hard and find winners early in a rally, and, like, Alcaraz is more than capable of doing that. That and the beautiful sort of 1990s Ferraris just flown past. Amazing. Anyway, so, yeah, I would say it's worth watching that, although if you've got really big Friday night plans, maybe they cancel them. And kind of the exact same thing goes for Djokovic against Davidovich Fokina. Like, to a certain extent, Davidovich Fokina is a great guy to watch. He's fiery, he's exciting. Motorbikes this time. And he has beaten Djokovic before, by the way, like, albeit in Monte Carlo, and I think it was just sort of a few months after Melbourne 2022, and Djokovic has talked a lot about how much that affected him, so I don't know if we can be, that forthright about how much of a difference that makes. And yeah, like, just struggling to see how that Monte Carlo match repeats itself. I think more likely is you'll see, like, maybe 4 sets. Like, Davidovich can have a bit of fun with the umpire. That's probably about it. But yeah, I'll be back tomorrow. Hopefully I'll have Calvin or George or even both to look back at that match, as with everything else on day 6. Just make sure you come back tomorrow.
Sports Social Podcast Network.